Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's economics lesson. My name is Letiane LG, and this lesson is brought to you by the Free State Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Today we'll be focusing on economic pursuit as part of our revision, and the topic that we'll be focusing on is South Africa's social and economic indicators, or in short, we call it indicators. It is always therefore important, grade 12s, to look at what is expected of us. That means when we go and look inside the examination guideline, therefore. So if we look at under topic 11 there, which is economic indicators as well as social indicators, we need to analyze South Africa's social and economic performance indicators, as well as their uses therefore. Also look at the state of the economy where we are assessing the economic performance. We're going to be looking at economic indicators on their own, and we know that this is our possible essay. The topic there have got subheadings that you also need to be aware of for 8 marks, for 1 mark under section A, as well as where you need to describe the concepts in section B. So therefore, our exam guideline expect us to cover the following 6 subtopics under economic indicators. The first one, it is inflation indicators. There we're going to be focusing on the 2 instruments, which is the CPI as well as the PPI. Then we're going to be looking at the foreign exchange or foreign trade indicators. We're going to be looking at terms of trade and the exchange rate. Then employment indicators, we're going to be focusing on EAP, which stands for economically active population, employment rate, as well as unemployment rate. Now, if you look at the first 2 subtopics, which is inflation, it's a topic that we do it in generally or entirety so, but we have done it in term 1 under business cycles, where we look at that when the business it's at the peak, prices of goods and services are likely to increase. We also did an aggregate demand and aggregate supply graph where we are trying to avoid inflation, and we also did it when we're doing the Phillips curve, where there was a trade-off between inflation rate as well as the unemployment rate. And with foreign trade indicators, we also did it in term 1, where we're looking at topic number 4. The terms of trade, we did it as a concept and formula as well. And also there was a full topic on exchange rate, demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange, currency appreciation, currency depreciation therefore. When we continue under economic indicators, number 4, it is the productivity indicators. Under productivity indicators, we are looking at labor productivity and remuneration per worker. Interest rates, we are looking at the repo rate, linking it with the prime rate and its effect on the economy as such. Then the last one, it is money supply indicators. Here we are looking at M1, M2, M3. As we continue, we're going to be focusing and to say what is included under M1, what is included under M2, and also what is included under M3. So those are your 6 subtopics under economic indicators. The first one, we have mentioned that it is the inflation indicators, followed by the foreign trade or the trade indicators. Then we also followed by the employment indicators. Then number 4, it is the productivity indicators. Number 5, interest rates indicators. Then number 6, it is money supply indicators. Okay. Under social indicators, therefore, we are looking at the following: demographic indicators, and elements under demographic indicators is the population growth as well as life expectancy. Number 2, as a subtopic, we've got nutrition and health, but I always say it is advisable to split the 2. Write nutrition on its own and then write health on its own. So under nutrition, we'll be focusing on malnutrition as well as obesity. Health, we'll be focusing on child mortality, under 5 mortality, spending on health through the budget, how many households or how many people have got access to clean water, how many of those have got access to sanitation. So those are some of the elements that we'll be focusing on under the health indicators. I repeat, grade 12s, separate the two when you're writing. I know some of the books or most of the sources, they say nutrition and health. But for the main purpose of exam, split them, write there nutrition indicators, and then come with health indicators so that you'll be able to get marks for therefore. Number 4, it's the issue of education. There we are looking at the percentage of public sector spending through the budget. Also, we are looking at the percentage of enrollment in secondary schools. It means we'll be looking at the bottleneck here as an indicator. How many learners started grade 1? How many learners exited grade 7? How many learners started high school grade 8, grade 9? And then how many started the FET, which is grade 10? And how many of those finished grade 12? Those are the indicators that we'll be looking at under education. Then, under services, therefore, we'll be focusing on the provision of electricity, the collection of refuse or garbage removal, water supply, as well as sanitation. So those are the elements that we'll be focusing on grade 12s. Number 6, as an element of social indicator, we'll be looking at housing as to how many houses were provided for and how many of those were completed. Urbanization, we're looking at what constitutes urbanization or what makes us to have urbanization or the concept urbanization. Therefore, we'll be looking at the natural growth in population. We'll be looking at migration, as you know that migration is split into two, which is emigration as well as immigration. Then we'll be looking at the new cities or founding of new towns. Then the last part of the exam guideline says, now that we have assessed the state of the economy in terms of social as well as economic indicators, therefore we need to compare ourselves internationally with other countries under the following aspects: the issue of globalization, the issue of international standardization, and we know that there are certain institutions that are responsible to publishing that. We are looking at institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, which is IMF, the World Bank, as well as the United Nations. Then comparison in terms of the financial aid and support. Lastly, comparison and forecasting. Okay, now let's start the topic there for grade 12 because you've assessed the outlines of the exam guideline. I always say, if we look at this topic of economic and social indicators, look at it as if like you are in a car. So that is our country. So you can imagine if a car does not have indicators and it's moving every day on the road, what is likely to happen therefore? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves. There's a car, the indicators are not working, or it does not have indicators, but it's moving like any other car and it's on the road. What is likely to happen? I'm sure you are thinking where you are sitting to say, you're not going to know whether the car is turning left or whether the car is turning to the right. Therefore, it means that some accidents will be incurred in the road. So therefore, it is important to measure the performance of the economy or to look at the status of the economy. Why are we doing that? It is there to show the general trends in the economy. Also, they are used to analyze economic performances, and not only that, but to predict what is likely to happen in the future. Okay? If we continue, South African Reserve Bank as well as Statistics SA provide the data that the government used to assess the performance of the economy. So it means we must be looking where we are now, where we are going, and where we come from. How are we going to assess that? Through the two indicators, the economic indicator as well as the social indicator, so that we can check where we are going. First, we predict the trends, whether there's an upward trend or a downward trend in the economy, or we are stagnant, we are not moving at all. Then if we have assessed the status of the economy, we can therefore predict the future. Okay? Then we, like it in South Africa, we have got these two institutions, which is the Reserve Bank as well as the Statistics SA, that help us to collect that data and they provide it to the government. The government use the data to plan for the future, therefore. Okay. Not only that, but we understand that there are other international institutions that supply us with information in terms of economic indicators. You know, when it comes to the rating status, we look at the Standard and Poor, we look at the Moody as well as the Fitch, which are there to tell us if we are in the junk status or we are out of the junk status. That is based on the borrowing as well as lending. How is our debt to the GDP in the whole country? So therefore, these international organizations are very important to assess the status of the economy. So hence we need to check. All right. Then we look at the following. Why must we look at indicators? The first one is the performance, comparison, specification, as well as the purpose. Under the performance, we will be saying these economic indicators are used to establish the state of the economy, where we are currently and where we are going. If you remember in term 1, you did the 3 indicators, which was the leading indicator, the coincident indicator, the lagging indicator, and the composite indicator, which is the sum of all. Those were telling us that leading indicator takes place before the business cycle can change, coincident happen at the same time, lagging happens after. Then, after we have collected the stats, we now check the performance of the economy, therefore. Okay? All right. Then, economic indicators, it is a statistic or data that shows the behavior of one variable in terms of another. Like I'm mentioning, where we are now, where we are going, or where were we and where we are now. In terms of comparison, we are looking at the changes in statistics or changes in the economy. And also, by comparing these two, we can therefore determine whether the economy is growing or there is a slowdown in the economy. Like you remember when I started the lesson, I said, take this economy as if like it's a car that is moving. So with these indicators, you can see if the car is turning to the left or the car is turning to the right. Therefore, we also in the economy of South Africa need to assess the performance of the economy to check if the economy is growing or the economy is slowing down. For specification purposes, these need to be meaningful. Indicators have to be complied in terms of their rules of completion. And the purpose indicators are complied for a specific purpose. For example, if we look at the CPI, it is calculated to show an increase in consumer price and also reflect the cost of living. So that tells you that if we don't look at inflation figures in terms of CPI, we cannot determine where the inflation is. And also, we cannot even determine the cost of living. So if we say cost of living is too high, it's because of we have calculated inflation, and that is collected through what? Indicators. And the performance in the economy, therefore. Okay. Then when we started, we do say that these indicators are divided into two, which is economic indicators and social indicators. When we take a look or focus on what is under economic indicators and what is under social indicators. Okay. Under economic indicators, we measure the performance and the trends of the economy over time. That means everyone is affected in South Africa and even beyond. While under the social indicators, there we are looking at the social well-being of a society. It means we are looking at the standard of living. As I always say, if you look at economic indicators, grade 12s, here they are focusing on the economy as a whole. It means whether you are rich, whether you are poor, economic indicators affect you the same. But if you look at the social indicators on the other side, this one looks at the standard of living. That's where now they get to separate demographically in terms of race, in terms of gender, as well as where we are living. Therefore, social indicators focus on the standard of living. What are we looking at here? The whole economic growth of South Africa, that is the increase in the production of goods and services, which is measured in terms of real GDP. Furthermore, we are looking at full employment, where we are looking at the economically active population. Those people who are looking for work, who are able to work, can find employment. And those who are actively looking for employment between the ages of 15 and 64 in South Africa. Then also we look at the trade internationally, where we measure exports and imports in terms of the trade. Price stability, the prices need to be maintained while we are still achieving economic growth, while we are still achieving full employment. And that is, once those prices increases, we know that inflation is likely to occur. So we need to monitor where inflation is and where inflation was. Okay. Then the last one under economic indicators, we'll be looking at the redistribution of income, where we look at the Lorenz curve as well as the Gini coefficient. That means the level of equality and the level of inequality in South Africa as a whole, grade 12s. And the social indicators, we are therefore focusing on demographics, which we'll discuss in detail. Then we'll be focusing on health and nutrition in South Africa. It affects you and me individually so. Okay. Then we look at the level of education and its impact on the standard of living. The issue of services, we remember that we said access to electricity, refuse removal, as well as access to sanitation. Those are the services that are provided. And lastly, we'll be looking at housing and urbanization. So these are the two indicators. Let me recap. I said under economic indicators, we are looking at the performance of the economy as a whole, as to say, where is the economy in terms of economic growth? That is the production of goods and services. And it is measured in terms of real GDP. When this economic growth increase, or there is an increase in the production of goods and services, they don't produce themselves. They require people to produce those. And once they are hired, we know that it leads to the second one, which is full employment. But under that full employment, we are looking at economically active population. That means those are the people between the ages of 15 and 64 who are willing to work, who are able to work, who are looking for employment. Others could have found employment. Others were looking for employment in the past 7 days. That is the EAP. Then we also looked at the issue of balance of payments. Here, balance of payments is the relationship between the exports as well as the imports, where we are saying in South Africa, for us to achieve great figures of economic growth, our exports values have to be higher than the imports values, because we are earning that foreign exchange rather than we as South Africans taking money outside. And the price stability thereof, as much as we want high levels of economic growth, but we want to promote an equal standard of living, where we are saying this price of goods and services need to be maintained so that people can be able to afford those. But as an indicator, we must check to say, what are the factors that causes an increase in the prices, which will lead to inflation? Under income redistribution or income equality, we are looking at the gap between the rich and the poor, where we'll be looking at the progressive income tax and as well as other form of taxes, therefore, or other form of government spending. Then under social indicators, demographics, health and nutrition, level of education, access to services, housing, as well as urbanization. Let's now expand these economic indicators into pieces so that they can make sense to you and I. The first one that we talked about, it is the issue of economic growth, full employment, exchange rate stability, price stability, and then the last one is economic equity. Those are the indicators that we covered under public sector. Now the first one is this one, inflation. Okay. Inflation, we know that it can be defined as a sustained or a continuous rise or increase in the general price level of goods and services over a given period of time. Then, how does the inflation affect us? Inflation results in the purchasing power of money decreasing if it keeps on increasing therefore. Then in South Africa, the Reserve Bank therefore targets to say, let the inflation rate or inflation percentage be between 3 and 6%. Now, one could be asking, what will happen if inflation is above the target of 6%, of which in recent years we realized that it went above the target, but then it came back within the target. If inflation is above the target, that tells us the prices of goods and services have increased drastically. Those with fixed salaries will never be able to afford or to purchase goods and services. They become poor. And those who don't have salaries at all or who rely on transfer payments, they may not be able to afford these goods and services. That means if inflation goes higher, that tells us that there's too much money in circulation and that needs to be controlled. But also if inflation is below the target, also it has got a negative impact on the economy because that tells us that there is actually a downward decrease in the prices of goods and services. Supply can be more while demand is less on the other side. So what's going to happen to firms? In other words, so there's no money in circulation. That is why the Reserve Bank will now intervene to say, let us reduce the interest rate so that businesses can borrow money so that they can expand in the production of those goods and services. Then inflation kicks in again. So this has to be managed within the target because if you remember when we did the Phillips curve in term 1, we said there should be a trade-off between unemployment as well as inflation, where we can say once unemployment decreases, people are employed, they've got more money. What happens to demand? Demand for goods and services increases. Spending becomes more. And again, if that happens and locally suppliers cannot meet the demand, the consumers locally are forced to go outside the country to demand those goods and services to a point where our currency depreciates or even the local businesses, the customers lose confidence and they close down. Unemployment starts again. So those are the dangers that we are looking at. So everything should be managed to a point that there should be equality in terms of demand and supply. Hence the target of 3 to 6%. We are looking at two factors or two indicators of inflation here, grade 12. It is the consumer price index as well as the producer price index. This one focuses on us, that means the households, where we demand goods and services. In this indicator, it measures the change in a cost of a fixed basket of goods and services that an average household will purchase. While on the other side, the producer price index, this one measures the price of manufactured goods as they leave the factory, as well as imported goods as they enter the country. Remember this one, the producer price index, it's a factory side of things. There are no services here. Services are on the other side, at the market value. So we are looking only at goods that are used as inputs, as well as that leave the factory. Okay. So one would ask you to distinguish between consumer price index as well as producer price index. It can be for 8 marks, or we can ask you to say briefly describe the concept consumer price index. This is how we want it. It measures the cost of fixed basket of goods and services that an average household purchase. Then the producer price index, that one measures the price of manufactured goods as they leave the factory or the price of imported goods as they enter the country. We know they go straight to the factory. Now we're going to be looking at the difference between the CPI as well as the PPI here, grade 12. And the CPI, which is the consumer price index, it excludes the prices of raw material as well as intermediate goods. As consumers, we want to buy the finished product. If I need a calculator, I'm not even going to ask myself, what did they add to have a final product, which is a calculator. So the cost of raw material here and intermediate goods, I'm not considering them. So they are excluded here. I'll just look at the market price. Hence, you look at the CPI, excludes the price of raw material as well as intermediate goods. But on the other side, it includes the price of raw material as well as intermediate goods. Okay, Then consumer price index value added tax has been included. It's at the market, it's at the shelf. It's where you and I purchase it. While on the other side, it's excluded. So here's the cash grade 12s. If you swap this, it means you would have lost marks. So you need to be clear on which one is which here. That means you take yourself out of the house and you go to the shop. What is it that you're going to find at the shop? You're going to find the final product. You're not going to find raw material. So as a consumer, it means price of raw material is excluded. When you get to the shop, when you buy it, you'll find it saying there 15% value added tax. So it includes VAT on the other side. CPI includes services while PPI excludes services. Remember I said it measures only goods. This one, manufactured goods are included in the CPI, are priced when they are sold to consumers. Like I mentioned, you and I only look at the final market value of a product. You don't ask questions to say what did they add and how much was it. But on the other side, in terms of PPI, manufactured goods are included in the PPI when they leave the factory, as well as those import prices on their first entry into the country. So that is the cash. This one, final product, VAT is included, services are included, the final price. This other side, imports are recorded separately, as well as the price of those goods when they leave the factory. VAT is excluded, but we look at the price of raw material. So that is the difference, therefore. If we ask you to say distinguish between CPI and PPI, you can write it in a table form. It will still get you full marks. Right. So when we look at the formula for inflation, where we are saying it is cost the CPI of year 1, year 2, I mean to say, and the CPI of year 1 multiply by 100 divided by the CPI of year 1, or current year, where we say current minus previous, all right, divide by previous, multiply by 100. I think that's easier that way. The current year, which is 2024, minus the previous year, which is 2023, divide by the previous year, which is 2023. Then you will get your inflation values. So in just a picture here, we are looking at a basket of goods and services that are priced from July the previous year and July this year. Selected, I'll be saying, as much as we believe that prices of goods and services are forever increasing, not always if we measure month to month. If you look at the first one, which is rice there, I'll say it for you. In the previous year, which was July 2021, it was around 31 rand, which is 30 rand 99. But if you look at in the very same time in 2022, it was now 25 rand 56 cent. So there was a decrease in the price of rice. Not always that those goods and services they increase over time. But if you look at other elements such as your brown bread as well as white bread, the issue of macaroni, maize meal, we see an increase. And in those, we can even ask you to say which one had a most increase in terms of the prices. If you look at the issue of cooking oil, for that matter, in July 2021, it was around 28 rand 59. But if you look at in July 2022, it was now sitting at around 45 rand. So one can say, look how much this issue of cooking oil has increased. And if you remember this, or if you are the person who followed trends, it was on the news in terms of how much cooking oil is. Those were what in traditional lobola payment, they would even say, take 100 liters of oil as part of the negotiations. Everything will be fine because of the pricing. And as economists, we understand it is not because it is because of inflation, where supply and demand does not react. Prices of goods and services are likely to increase. So in short, those are some of the things that we look at. The issue of cooking oil increasing drastically, so from 28 rand to 45 rand. per 750 milliliters. That was a huge increase in inflation. In recent months, you know, the issue of eggs were also on the news in terms of their pricing. Therefore, we can also compare the inflation or the prices of eggs last year in a particular month as well as this year in a particular month. How do we do that? By applying the formula for inflation. And the catch is this one, grade 12. You're going to write the full formula there for you to get marks. Most of us omit the formula, hence we don't get full marks. Start with the formula. Current year minus previous year, divide by previous year, multiply by 100. You can get a mark for that. Employment indicators here. We always say it is not easy to measure that one. As employment, there are a lot of people that are employed in the informal sector and that are not registered or even recorded for. So it is always difficult, but we are looking at what we call economically active population. Who are those? These are the people who are willing. These are the people who are able to work, and these are the people between the ages of 15 and 64. If those people are able to find employment or they are looking for employment, they are part of economically active population. It's a reminder that this was done in grade 11. And this compromises of people that work in the formal sector, those that work in the informal sector. The employers themselves are counted as part of the economically active population, not employees only. The self-employed persons, the ones that you see at the street or something, as long as they are able to generate income, those are part of economically active population. So as much as we think that employment consists of only those people that get to the office or something, construction are part of those, although it's seasonal, and those people that are in the streets, they are counted in as long as there is income generated there. And also we are looking at people that are unemployed but actively looking for employment for the past 7 days. Those people are part of economically active population. Okay, so in short, remember that when you measure, when you talk to employment or the employment rate, it is the rate that is calculated under the economically active population. But employment itself, it is those people that are willing and able to work. Okay. Then there are two indicators that we look at under employment. The first one, it is the employment rate itself, and then the other one is the unemployment rate. So here we are saying it is the number of people or persons expressed as a percentage of the economically active population. So you take the total labor force here. Remember the labor force we said it includes the workers, the self-employed, the employers themselves, and those that are employed but looking for employment, informal or formal sector. When you take all of them, they give you what we call total labor force. Then out of that total labor force, now you're going to be looking at those now that are employed. Then from there, it will give you what we call the employment rate. That is how the Stats SA calculates that. So as to whether there is an increase in employment rate or decrease in unemployment, the calculation is from there. The employed percent expressed as a percentage of the EAP. Okay. Why are these employment indicators important? Because they give us the trends in employment in different sectors or industries. They also show what we call a structural change. And furthermore, they calculate what we call labor productivity and utilization of full potential. If you look at Stats SA, when they issue figures, now it's October, around October, they are measured per quarter. So it means it's January, February, March. In April, the first quarter of employment or unemployment figures are issued. And then it says April, May, June. In July, we get the employment or unemployment figures in South Africa for the second quarter. Then it says August, September, October. So it means around November, when you are writing the preliminary or no, the final examination, just be on the lookout as to check whether employment has increased or unemployment has increased. It's issued per quarter. Okay. Then unemployment rate there, it is all the EAP. Who are those people again? We said these are the people that are actively looking for employment. They are willing to work, but they cannot find employment. But they were looking for work for the past 7 days prior to the investigation. Okay. So those are some of the issues that we talk about here. Then when I explain the issue of unemployment rate here, we cannot say everyone is unemployed while they were not actively looking for work. There are those that we call discouraged work seekers. It means they have been looking and looking to a point that they have stopped looking for employment. So those are the discouraged work seekers. We've got students that are seasonal workers. They work on particular holidays. So on prior to investigation, if you are part of those, then you are included in the unemployment rate. So it's very important for us to look at that, economists. Then number 3, we are looking at what we call the foreign trade indicators. As I remind you to say, it was discussed under topic 4, where we're looking at the balance of payment as well as foreign exchange and in terms of trade. Then under foreign trade, there are 2 indicators that we look at there. The first one, it is terms of trade followed by exchange rates. Okay. Under terms of trade, we are looking at the relationship between the price received for exports and the amount of imports that money can buy. The formula for terms of trade, it is the index of prices of exports or average price of exports divided by the average price of imports multiplied by 100. So under these indicators, you've got more formulas that are very close to each other. It means now you need to be able to practice them. Hence, I always advise that with formulas, I paste them to a point that every time I pass there, I'll be able to remind myself these formulas. Okay, so the changes in the terms of trade serves as an indicator of changes that are likely to spill over in the balance of payment and may cause a deficit which leads to a depreciation in the currency depreciation in the currency. So here what we are saying is that every time we are calculating terms of trade, that means the ratio of exports and imports, it should always be higher. We should get a higher rate of exports. That tells us that we've got more export earnings that are coming into the country than import. No, more export earnings, yes, that are coming to the country while we export goods and the services. But on the other side, there is less of the import payments that are going out on the other side. So it's very important for us to look at that. We need the money to come into South Africa. That tells us that we are exporting more goods and then export earnings are coming in. On the other side, we need to have a situation where there's less money going out of South Africa because of imports, because there's a local production and we support local businesses. Exchange rates. Here it is the rate at which one currency it is expressed or it is exchanged for another. When we determine the exchange rate, we're going to be saying today, how much is $1 to 1 rand to the rand. Okay. Therefore, exports and imports are strongly influenced by the exchange rate of the domestic currency, appreciation and depreciation. In short, if the rand gains value or appreciates, we're likely to buy in other countries because we can afford. But when the rand depreciates or loses value, we are less interested in other countries and we buy local. But the danger is this one. Some businesses import intermediate goods or goods from other countries, which they are used in the production process, such as equipment and big trucks that we don't produce in South Africa. So if the rand depreciates, that tells us that they will import these goods or equipment at a higher price which they will include in the final price of the goods and services, which in return becomes expensive for you and I locally on the other side. So the currency appreciation, it's good and it's bad. What am I saying now? It is good on intermediate goods, which is these goods that are used as inputs when the currency appreciates. But it is also bad on the issues of the consumers, because you and I can now afford to buy from other countries we don't support locally. So that is the danger there. So, and then the other one, we're looking at the issues of one of the intermediate goods that we're looking at or input is the issue of petrol. If the rand depreciate, the price of importing petrol becomes higher. And in South Africa, as much as it is an administered price, it becomes expensive as an input that is used in the production process. So this currency appreciation and currency depreciation, it should favor the businesses and it will favor us locally on the other side. Productivity, therefore, here we look at the relationship between the input, that means the factors of production, as well as the output, which is the production of goods and the more goods and services that are produced. So the more output you can produce at the same or less input, the more productive you are. That means you master what you call economies of scale. Less input and more output. More profits for the business, and the business gets to expand and hire more workers. While we are saying productivity is linked to cost, the more productive you are, the lower the cost, because you can produce much faster or more at less. Okay. If one laborer can produce more than the other laborer, and then the cost of labor will be reduced. And if more keep on producing more and more, and then the cost of labor or the cost of production decreases, then we'll be saying that is productivity. Then we can look at it in the country as a whole, where we are saying productivity will increase the real GDP per capita. And this will lead to an increase in economic growth, the one that we started with. And economic growth, when it increases, we know that more goods and services are produced and more people will be hired. Employment can be achieved, therefore. So it's very important for us to check if productivity is improving over time. Under this productivity, we are looking at two things here, where we look at labor productivity as well as remuneration per worker. Okay. So under labor productivity, we look at a formula where we'll take real GDP divided by the number of employed workers. That means the output against the number of employed workers. Remuneration per worker, here we are looking at if labor productivity increases by less or more than the real wage, inflationary pressures will occur and business cycle may tend to be unfavorable. What are we saying here? We are saying that the output should be equal to the issue of wages on the other side. Because once the output is less, while the wages is more, we know that we're going to demand more of the goods and services. So if there's no output to support the demand, the prices of goods and services will increase. And when these prices of goods and services increase, this leads to inflation, which we tend to suffer at the end of the day. Okay, the relationship between productivity and wage is very important because employers aim to make what? Profit, while workers aim to improve their standard of living. So employers would want more output with less wages that are paid. Why? Because of profit. On the other side, workers will want output with more of the wages. Why? Because of improved standard of living, affordability. So there should be a relationship there of output. They should have relationship against what? Wages. There shouldn't be a point where wages are higher but output is less. Demand is going to be more than supply, inflation. Then the other one, we're focusing on the issue of interest rates, therefore, and as we have covered them under business cycle as well as the public sector, and we looked at the issue of monetary policy there. And interest rates are the main instrument that are used in the monetary policy. They are the key role players in the economy. Also, it is vitally important in terms of measuring economic growth. So when you look at the issue of interest rates, we'll be focusing on the repo rate as well as the prime rate. These two are very close to each other, and sometimes we see a situation where learners or candidates confuse the two. So we are saying here, be careful. The repo rate or the repurchase rate is the rate at which the SARB lends money to their clients, which are the commercial banks on the other side. On the other side, the prime rate here is the rate at which banks lends money to households as well as businesses. So it means who starts first? The repo rate. The Reserve Bank starts by borrowing money to the commercial banks at a certain rate. After that, the commercial banks will also say, businesses, households, as well as government, you need money? Yes, but there will be interest. What do you call that interest? The prime lending rate or the prime rate. Just for argument's sake, if we can tell currently in South Africa, which is now October, what is the repo rate? What is the rate at which the Reserve Bank charges commercial banks? For interest sake, can we tell the figure now? Because the other one that is going to be there is going to be issued in November. That means the MPC is going to meet again in November. So currently, what is the repo rate so that we can determine the prime rate? Okay, I'll tell you. Currently, the repo rate is sitting at 8%. That means the repurchase rate is sitting at 8%. Now the question would be, if the repo rate is sitting at 8%, what is the value or the figure for the prime rate? Okay. Under Money and Banking grade 11, we have done this, where we talk to the functions of the Reserve Bank. So there is a gap, the gap between the prime rate as well as the repo rate. I repeat now, the gap between the prime rate as well as the repo rate, it is 3,5. So we usually say to learners, if the repo rate is 8%, can you determine the rate of the prime rate? And learners minus instead of adding. So if the repo rate is at 8%, the prime rate is currently at 11,5%. Now, what are the consequences therefore? Because you and I, this is the one that we get to experience, which is the prime rate. So if the interest rates move up, the debt of households and businesses require a bigger payment and bigger installment. And then contrary to that, if the interest rates decrease, it means we'll pay less. So we celebrate a price decrease in terms of interest rates because that tells us that there will be more money that is used to purchase consumer goods and spending. But later on, if interest rates keep on decreasing and we have got more money in circulation, that will also lead to inflation. Remember, grade 12, we said the inflation should be between the target of 3 and 6%. So when you see a decrease in interest rates, that tells you that we are managing inflation. It's within target. But once interest rates increase, it shows that inflation is above or it's getting higher, so that we need to control that. Okay. Then we look at the last one, which is money supply. Here we are looking at money in circulation or money in circulation in the economy, as well as how fast it moves from one person to another, as this indicate a higher or a low inflation. So if we demand more of these goods and services faster, that tells us that the velocity of money is moving much, much faster. It moves faster from one person to another. But if inflation is within target, we are able to afford, we get to keep more money in the reserves or we get to save more money. Okay, so let's look at the categories of money or money supply. We're looking at M1, M2, as well as M3. M1 includes only coins and notes. the ones that you and I have in our wallets. And then M2 includes coins, notes, as well as other short-term and medium deposits, as well as loans. That means the 6 months to a year. That is included under M2. In short, we are saying it is M1 plus other short-term and medium deposits and loans. But question would be, do you still remember what is M1? Yes, M1 is coins and notes. Then M3, we are saying it is coins and notes plus short-term and medium deposits as well as loans. We get M3. In other words, we are saying it is M2 plus long-term deposits and loans of domestic and private sector within the monetary institutions. Another question that I always like to ask is, what would happen if every one of us wake up and there's $1 million in our bank account? I know, spending goes like nobody's business. And that day will never wake up and go to work. So the question would be asking, is it bad to have too much money in circulation? Or is it good to have too much money in circulation? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves. Because if all of us could have $1 million, I'm telling you, that day we all call in and say we are not going to work because we want to spend this money. And if you are a child or a student or a learner sitting somewhere, you wake up and there's $1 million, I'm telling you, those classes will be empty because of spending. So question is having too much money good or is having too much money bad? Okay. Too much money in circulation could lead to more spending and higher what? Inflation because of demand of goods and services, and supply is not there. But on the other side, too little money in circulation leads to underspending, which reduces production, which leads to unemployment, which leads to a decline in economic growth. So that tells you that there should be a balance within the economy. There should be someone who's willing to wake up in the morning to go and work so that production can take place and have that money, spend it and pass it to someone else. And that person also, there should be someone who's willing to work. Because if all of us would have money, no one would be willing to work. But question is, where will we get the supply of the goods and services that we need? Because factories are closed and businesses are closed, but there's a high demand. But on the other side, if there is little money in the economy or less money in the economy, again, that leads to less production because some of those will be retrenched in terms of affordability, and unemployment increases on the other side, and low or decline in economic growth. And then the other indicators also are affected on the other side. So those are the things that we need to look at grade 12s. With that in mind, there's an activity that is taken from the prelim paper Northwest 2024. May we please take about 5 minutes to do this activity, and that 5 minutes starts now. Welcome back, grade 12s. Welcome back. And we always say, may we please look at the analysis of the data response first before you can even attempt to answer the questions. And time is of value, especially when you're in the exams. So your analysis should be as important as fast and important. Now, if you look at here, there's a situation where you look at the Stats SA announces food price increases. And if you look at here, it's like these people are actually playing, but it is the state of the economy, the way we find ourselves at. So hence we need these indicators to look at where we are. If you look at the arrow on this side, it's inflation. It's increasing like nobody's business. So it's pushing us up. But the problem is economic growth on the other side. It's a burden on the economy because production is not taking place as it should be. So there should be a balance. There should be a balance on the other side. That is why if you look at the bubble speech there, it says get us off. So we need to control that. South Africa has entered into a period that is categorized as stagflation. While the other side, the other international organization that measures the performance as well as comparison in terms of indicators, which is out of the three that I've mentioned. I mentioned UN, which is the United Nations. I also mentioned the World Bank, and this one is the IMF, International Monetary Fund. Also project that there will be a downward growth in terms of the economy in South Africa. Now let's look at the question therefore. Now economics, it says to us, you as a learner also need to be well informed about the state of the economy in South Africa so that it's easy for us to answer these questions. Okay. The first question says, identify an institution that works to achieve sustainable growth and prosperity for all its members. And the answer there is the IMF. You get 1 mark for that. Tick. We are fine. All right. Then the second one says, name the economic indicator that refers to extreme weak economic growth, not only economic growth, coupled with increasing in prices and also high unemployment. So a situation where I always say learners should look at my hand. There is high economic growth, there is high unemployment. No, there is low economic growth, there is high unemployment, and there's high inflation or high prices. And the answer there is stagflation. Everything is stacked or stagnant. Okay. And then the other one says briefly describe the concept inflation. Here, grade 12, any way that you put it, as long as you're going to tell us that there's a sustained or general increase or continuous increase in the prices of goods and services over time, will give you the marks coupled with a decline in the purchasing power of money. So as you go, those are the marks that you are getting. Up to so far, here in paper 1, we are saying these are part of the hanging fruits. You shouldn't be numbering these questions and leaving them blank. These are the answers. They are somewhere around the data response. I'm telling you that even someone who's not doing economics, as they analyze, they will be able to pass. So I'm asking creators that do not leave these marks. We are fighting for distinctions and we are fighting for 100% pass in the subject. And so those questions there are very important for us. When we look at number 4, why is the consumer price index used as an inflation indicator there? Okay, it shows the changes in the prices paid by consumer for a basket of goods and services, full stop. Or it is the best measure to adjust consumer payments so that they can afford goods and services. If you remember in our lesson here, we showed you as to you measure to say, how much was I paying for this particular good and how much are you paying now? Then there can be adjustment in terms of budget as well as affordability. That will determine the cost of living, and later on will be determined the standard of living. The last one says, how does inflation lead to low economic growth. If you looked at the data response, we see a point where inflation is increasing, but growth is going down. So the question here says, what is the relationship between inflation as well as low economic growth? And these questions, again, are those that we say it is a cause and effect relationship. They're very important, therefore. Okay. During inflationary periods, prices are high and it will be more expensive to incur a debt or to even borrow money. What are we saying? Consumers cannot afford higher prices because inflation is high. Okay. A decrease in demand for goods and services will also lead to less production activities and employment on the other side. Companies, therefore, uh, often sell few of their products and slow down, therefore, NK. So these are the possible answers that we are saying we should have there. But again, in your answering, you would have talked to the issue of inflation, which is increasing prices, and also the impact that it has on economic growth. And this side, they already chose a side to say a lower economic growth. So they're telling us there's a decline in economic growth. Then when you get your question paper, underline this cause and effect relationship. Then it will be easy for you to answer the question and satisfy the requirements of that question. Okay. Now, the last part of the indicators, we are looking at what we call the social indicators. Here, I always say this one refers to you and I. We remove them from South Africa as a whole, but we take them inside the household here. What are we looking here at here? We are looking at demographics, where we'll be looking at the age, we'll be looking at the gender, the income, education, the issue of family life cycle, religion, and other socioeconomic status. Those are what we call social indicators. And sometimes they are called human development indicators or development indicators. Why? Because they lead to an improvement in standard of living, of which all of us wants to have a less cost of living and a high standard of living. You remember the characteristics of developing countries and developed countries. Let's expand on the demographic cycles. Under demographic, there are two indicators there, which is population growth as well as life expectancy. This is the description of the physical population and its composition. And we are always saying to get this, a census should be conducted. And that will tell us how many people we have in South Africa as to migration or natural growth. It provides information about where people are situated, what are their needs, and how investment can be best spent. Under life expectancy, here we're looking at the number of years that is a person that is born today, which means a newborn, is expected to live or will live. Then you put it there. If prevailing patterns of mortality remained the same, we say ceteris paribus. So we are looking at the number of years a person is expected to live from now on going this way. If you look at the population growth in South Africa, we're sitting at around 59 something, if you're not 60. Then if you look at in terms of the average years, we still know that in South Africa, women have got a much higher life expectancy than men. Okay, so that is done in terms of the statistics that is calculated. So under demographics, two things that are calculated there, the population growth as well as life expectancy. And under those demographics, we are looking at the gender, the age, the dwelling, etc. Okay. So it is therefore important for the government to know the average life expectancy, and because working people or women are required, okay, or they require a range of social services and also the supply of the tax base, so that we know that how many people are going to contribute to the fiscus of the country as well as the tax base. Therefore, it is also important to measure the people's ability to live long, the issue of healthy life. In terms, the other one is community communication, to say, and then to participate in community and have sufficient income, as well as experience a decent lifestyle. So these are very important. They are measured under an indicator that is called demographic. Health and nutrition, remember I said split the two. Under health indicators, we are looking at other aspects. The first one that we look at is the issue of child mortality. What is that? This is measured in terms of the number of infants who die before reaching the age of 1. That is child mortality. Then the other one is under 5 mortality. Here it's measured in terms of the probability that a newborn baby will die before reaching the age of 5. In developing countries, grade 12, it's a problem where we experience most of these health issues. In South Africa, at least we have got a better healthcare facilities where this is very, very low, where we experience less child mortality and we experience less under 5 mortality. At least people get to live much longer. Why? Because of our state of our healthcare facilities. Although others in the rural areas are still far from us, but we know that even the midwives still do a wonderful job because of access to other basic services. Spending on healthcare, you remember that in South Africa, after education, health is the second largest in terms of the pie. So hence I'm saying that we are good as an indicator on this one. The government is doing so well if you were to assess or evaluate this indicator. On the other side, we look at malnutrition. There we look at weight for age as well as the height for age. And then also we look at the number of children who go hungry. That's what we are looking at there. And the weight each and every time, the children needs to be monitored every time. They know that it's clinic day to day, of which in developing countries, some of those have never been into a hospital. They were born out of hospital. They even died before they can even see what a hospital or a clinic is. If they get access to health, it's because of other organizations such as the Gift of the Givers as well as the Red Cross. So these indicators are very important because there shouldn't be a child that go hungry, and they should grow in a proper way. Then also we look at the issue of overweight. It exists when in association between obesity and childhood and the high prevalence of the issues of diabetes as well as high blood pressure and etc. So of which we do not want to see a situation where children, especially in younger ages, are overweight, or in the other side where they are underweight. There should be a normal growth, of which it will tell us, or it indicates the first indicator that we talked about, which is life expectancy. So this has got a direct relationship to that. Okay. Access to clean water, where we look at the number or the percentage of population that have reasonable access to safe drinking water that is treated and that is uncontaminated, therefore. So we can also, this one, it has got some successes and failures, because you will find that in the cities or in the urban areas, yes, they do have that. But in the rural areas, where the cows and other animals, or where animals in general drink, you still find people that still go there to fetch water as part of the drinking. And they do not even have chlorophyll or other means of purifying the water thereof. So this indicator, we could say that South Africa has succeeded to a certain percentage, and to a certain latter percentage, it has not been successful in a way when you look at access to clean water. That is the number of people that have got access to drinkable, clean water, where you don't have to go to the rivers and the dams to fetch water. So in the rural areas, such is still take place. There are taps in some points, but there's no water inside those taps. Access to sanitation as well as or sanitation facilities. Here we are looking at the number of people that have got an adequate sanitation facilities. And that can effectively prevent human and animal as well as insect contact. Where we look at Do you have flush bathrooms? Do you have water nearby? Or are we still using pit toilets and etc.? So this indicator also can be evaluated to say some certain parts of the country have succeeded and some certain parts of the country have not succeeded. In recent years, we also realized that there are even schools in South Africa that still don't have access to sanitation facilities, which will hamper the health of the learners or also the people around there. So this indicator can be evaluated. There also can be an improvement if budget is shifted there and is used effectively. Okay. These measures are important for the government as they are supplying the healthcare and sometimes have to include the issue of legislation such as aiding vitamin A or to a basic stuff such as the bread, etc. So here we're talking about the issues of nutrition. Okay. Education, like I mentioned, grade 12s to say these indicators are socio-economic issues where some of us can experience those or some do not experience those. So it differs from a person to a person based on experience. But at the end of the day, as indicators, we want an equal opportunities or equal access to such. The standard of living are directly connected to their education, which is very true here, grade 12s. And educated people are employable and even can earn much income as also provide for their needs and wants. So under education, there are two important aspects that we look at. I mentioned we look at the secondary enrollment percentage. That means how many people started grade 1, how many learners started grade 1. Each and every province will tell you the stats as to the number of learners that started grade 1. And then when we look at the bottom, the issue of exit point, which is the grade 7 for primary. If fair B, you can use it phase and say foundation phase 1, 3, 4 in, and then you go to the issue of 6 out, and then 7, as well as 8, which is the get bent. Then we look at how many learners exited grade 9 and entered into grade 12. Then also as a country, we can determine how many learners started grade 10 and finished grade 11. It was in the news recently to say there is one sum to say those learners that started grade 1 12 years ago, if there are 100,000, you find that now in grade 12, the ones that are enrolled or registered to write the final exam, it's no longer that number, it's around 80,000. So the question would be, what happened in the middle? Some of those dropped out, some of those because of diseases and other factors, some of those is child-headed. So these issues are very important as social indicators at grade 12s. The other aspect that we are looking at is the issue of adult literacy. We are looking at the people that are over the age of 15 that can read and write, because it is very important. You'll find that in the country, there are adults, but those adults cannot read and write. Some who can read, they cannot write. So how are they therefore going to improve their standard of living? Because when we started, we said the standard of living is directly connected to the issue of education level. Okay. Then when we refer to public sector, we mentioned that education gets the largest pie in terms of budget and funding, followed by health and etc. Services, here we are looking at access to those basic services. It is in the constitution that to those that cannot afford, there should be a provision by the government to say there should be at least 6 kilowatts or kiloliters of water per household per month. There should be at least access to 50 kilowatts of electricity per household per month. Also, there should be refuse removal by the municipality thereof. Then, the very same people that are allocated, there should be a sewage and sanitation maintenance or subsidized for those who cannot. Why? Because these services are directly linked to people's standard of living. What are we looking at? Electricity, water supply, refuse removal, as well as sanitation. It's very important to know that these basic services differ from rural areas too, to urban areas. Housing and urbanization. Okay, what are we looking at here? Urbanization, we are looking at the process whereby there's an increase in a country's population to concentrated or urban areas. Or you can say when people move from rural areas into urban areas, that is urbanization. This is an important measure as more people come to live in urban areas. There will be a greater demand for housing, there will be a greater demand for services, and the level of education as well as healthcare. When we started the issue of industrial development, we are talking about Gauteng being the smallest province but with the largest number of people. Why? Because people are looking at the urbanization part of it. They are looking for better access to services, better access to employment, better access to education, better access to healthcare, and etc. Of which we said that even the other provinces should have access to this thing so that we avoid the issue of urbanization. Each and every province should be equally distributed in terms of services, therefore. Okay. And then the issue of housing, we looked at the percentage of the population that lives in permanent dwelling or in terms of housing, where we said those that cannot afford, government should subsidize. Okay. And then the government issue housing subsidies to help the poor or to own and to have a house. And then we are looking at to a point to say any person who's earning 3,500 or less can get a housing subsidy. Those who are not employed at all, we know that they get what we call free housing through the program that is called the Reconstruction and Development Program. You and I call it the RDP housing, of which those houses should have water, running water, should have electricity, should have sanitation, and also there should be a situation where government comes and collect the refuse and the garbage therefore. So these indicators are very important. Where did we start? Grade 12, we started in a situation where we get the full demographics, the population size as to how many people live in South Africa, where are they mostly concentrated, and then after that, we can move to the other indicators to say, if we establish those, how many of those have got access to this level of education and how much funding government should provide for education. We looked at the issue of health as well as nutrition on the other side, as to say, under 5 mortality, those who die before the age of 5, as well as the child mortality rate, and access to healthcare in general. Furthermore, we looked at the issue of services. I'm mentioning them: electricity, clean water, sanitation, as well as refuse removal. So each and every learner where you are sitting, you can evaluate to say the government has been successful or it has not been successful based on the experiences that you are having. So if where you are, government, there are no proper housing, or there's no access to sanitation, there's no access to clean water, then you can say that the government has failed to deliver this and this because of this and this and this and this. But if you've got access to such, you can say that there's been efforts by the government as people in South Africa, especially balance between the rural and the urban areas, although they will differ. They've tried because they've given people RDP houses. In those the RDP houses, there's water supply, there's sanitation, there's electricity, and there's also refuse removal. So this can be evaluated therefore. And then what are we doing here? We are trying to avoid the issue of urbanization. Lastly, we look at the issue of international comparison here, grade 12, where we look at the aspects of globalization. International trade payments are affected by the exchange rate, of which we said when we do this topic in topic 1, we said our dream is to see a point where 1 rand is equivalent to 1 US dollar. Where if I need to buy goods from the United States, I do not have to go to the foreign exchange market first to determine as to how much is 1 rand to $1. So these things should be there. Therefore, international trade are affected by the exchange rate. And we look at the internationalization, where the branch offices in foreign countries are there to monitor aspects of trade as well as economic indicators. If you go to America now, there is South African embassy. If you go to, if you come in, if here in South Africa, there is Botswana embassy, there is Zimbabwean embassy, and etc., so that we can monitor the performance in each and every country. Therefore, okay. So this internationalization, they look at the issue of indicators to publish financial reports into a single currency and pay dividends in different currencies. As you know that most of us will measure per dollar per day. That's how the standardization works. Okay. And when you look at standardization, it's international organizations such as the World Bank, we've mentioned those, the IMF, as well as the UN. These are very specific in determining the utilization as well as applying of the social as well as economic indicators in a particular country. Why? Benefits from this organization cannot be measured if indicators are not available, such as bridging the finance from the IMF, the World Bank, as well as the UN. So hence we need to compare ourselves as South Africa in terms of level of development against other countries. Where do we get the stats? Through indicators, therefore, socially and economic indicators. We look at the last one, which is the aid and support, where the foreign countries, the government, and international institutions, as well as other NGOs, I mentioned the Gift of the Givers, I mentioned the Red Cross, are globally involved in providing what we call financial aid. The country's needs indicators include the domestic income, the production expenditure, the issue of poverty, the issue of education, healthcare data to receive aid and to measure the impact of this aid. So we cannot just, it means this organization cannot just come to a country and say, we are here to offer support if it's not needed. So how do they see that? Through indicators, therefore. I will also make example or reference to the issue of COVID-19, where we said the rich countries or those who can get access to vaccine should also help the poor countries or the developing countries. But how would they know the quantity to supply in terms of vaccine? Is through these indicators, the issue of demographics. Okay. So we also look at the aspects of human rights, the issue of environment, as well as governance, where the children should be protected, there should be less pollution, and they should be free of corruption when you look at the governance thereof. Indicators might also be required by this aiding organization. And then when we look at comparison and forecasting, therefore, where we say capital markets are liberated through this globalization. Okay. Then capital moves where there is best returns. So what am I saying here, grade 12? In summary of this, we look at the indicators where we said they give us the performance of where the economy is or where the economy might be heading. Then you divide these two indicators into two, where we say economic indicators and we look at the social indicators. Economic indicators focuses on the country as a whole, where they affect not only you, but everyone in the country, where we look at the aspects of inflation, the aspects of money supply, the issue of interest rates and employment. They affect us as a whole. But now when it comes to social indicators, some certain elements in the rural areas might not be the same as in the urban areas. The level of education may differ in the very same country, where you find that the urban areas have got a much higher level of education, the rural areas have got less higher level of education. And also there, we look at the number of people that start grade 1 and live at grade 12, and the number of people that can read and write, especially the adult ones. So those are the aspects that we are looking at the grade 12s. Okay, so the last topic here, we are looking at the data response that was taken from the Free State Prelim here in 2024. And may we also take about 5 minutes to do this activity. Starts now. All right, let's look at this. This part of the question I'm saying, these are all marks hanging there. Just analyze the data response first. I always say there's obesity and overweight selected in Govimvamba students in 2022. Then we know that the black one it's girls, while the gray one it's boys there. Then if you look at the bar graph, we look at the participation as well as the age group. Okay, so let's look at the questions. The first one was saying, which social indicator is reflected in the graph above? It is nutrition, because nutrition is associated with overweight as well as malnutrition, if you remember well. Identify the gender that had the lowest participation, and we realized that boys don't want to participate. They had lowest, or they are not in numbers as compared to girls. That could also be a factor, because in schools generally there are more girls than boys. Number 3, briefly describe the term under 5 mortality. Here we said it refers to the number of children that die before the age of 5 years. That is the key factor there. So these are the marks that I say you get those marks there. They are given to you. Okay. And then the last 2 questions. The first one says, explain the negative impact that overweight or in younger age groups may have on the economy. So there is a cause and effect relationship again. What is the cause? It is the issue of overweight. The effect it will have on the younger ages in the economy. Right, lesser participation of the economically active population or the country's potential labor force. There will be less improvement in sports, resulting in loss of opportunities to earn income and living because of the overweight issue. And then we know that the others may experience diseases such as diabetes at a very young age, which will also impact participation in the economy. Okay. And then the last one, why are demographic indicators important in the economy? Remember the demographics, we said they talked to the issue of age, gender, race, as well as income levels. These are used to classify people in the population. The government used these indicators to plan for future and thereby achieving certain outcomes such as the healthcare for the aged. That is why there's a need for us to look at the issue of demographics. And businesses are use these demographics or demographic indicators information to learn more about their target market. So this is why these demographic indicators are very important. Then we say learn them first, then be able to apply them. Therefore, okay. Then the last one for 8 marks there, we'll just run through that. We are saying analyze the usage of the repo rate as an interest rate indicator in South Africa. Also, this one was taken from the Free State Prelim 2024. The SARB uses, or is the main monetary authority in South Africa and responsible for determining the repo rate. And then we know that just before the COVID, the repo rate were adjusted to certain basis points, such as January, it was adjusted by 25 basis points. That means from 6.5 to 6.25 down. Okay. And when the repo rate is increased by 50 basis points, it adjusted can be possibly moved from 6.5 to 6 there, depending on the adjustment there. And then the other one, the repo rate can be used by the SRB to stimulate or dampen the economy. Remember we said that if the economy is overheating and inflation is high, we increase the repo rate so that demand for credit and access to credit becomes less. And in that way, we know that it will be dampened. And when the economy is not doing well, reduce the interest rates. And when we reduce the interest rates, we know that there will be demand for credit and demand for more goods and services because of affordability. Okay. And when stimulating the economy, the repo rate is adjusted downwards, as I've mentioned. Therefore, and the Reserve Bank adjusted the repo rate down by 300 basis points towards the middle of 2020. You and I know it was because of COVID, so affordability was less, therefore. Okay. And in 2022, the repo rate was at 8.25, which was the highest after 15 years of the time. So this indicator tells us, or we monitor the issue of where the economy is. Like I'm mentioning in conclusion, is that inflation should be between the target of 3 and 6%. So if inflation is higher, the repo rate are likely to be increased so that they can dampen it. And if inflation is low, but within target, the interest rates or the repo rate may be maintained within target. As currently in October, it is sitting around 8%, and we'll check in November when it is maintained or reduced. With that regards, grade 12s, we are saying thank you so much for watching this lesson. Until we see you next time.